Hey everyone, welcome all my new subscribers and welcome if you've been a subscriber from the very beginning. I'll never forget you when this cult finally takes off. In this video, I want to talk to you about how a 5-gram mushroom trip last summer significantly helped me grieve the death of my grandfather. I'm going to do this by walking back through my experience last summer and having the 5 stages of grief up on my computer. And perhaps we'll see if there's a correlation between my experience and what people have apparently come to a consensus that people who are grieving go through. And I believe that I went through all of these in an extremely rapid time period, whereas most people tend to apparently experience this over a long period of time. The story starts with me taking 5 grams worth of psilocybin capsules. Now, I really hate the taste of magic mushrooms, and so I tend to produce capsules that are about 250 milligrams each. And so I took whatever the calculation would be to be 5 grams worth of that. I wanted a true heroic dose, and I wanted to do it at a neighboring park. And I wanted to do it by a lake, and I wanted to relax. I brought a blanket, and I had full intention to do so. But when I got to the lake, I quickly realized that it was way too populated. I should have anticipated that it would be that way because it was a very sunny day and basically mid-afternoon. But I got to the beach, and I figured, yeah, this is not going to work out. So I took my mushroom capsules and took them as in put them back in my pocket, and I drove back home. And so I just took them by myself in my bedroom. And Terrence McKenna always says, take 5 grams of mushrooms in the dark by yourself. And I'm not sure if he prescribed music or not, but I did start with some light music. And the experience began. And so I'm going to start talking about the 5 stages of grief that I went through on this experience. So the first thing that I'm reading here is denial. And so what I remember of how my experience related to denial was more so being in awe. It completely amplified my sense of awe at the fact that this person no longer existed. So my version of denial was not a direct denial that this could be the case. It was more just like it was the feeling of being stumped almost. Just a very powerful feeling of, wow, this is really the way that life goes. It really just got real. And I hadn't even thought about that before. I really had kind of just compartmentalized the memory away. And so I would say that that was how my trip related to a sense of denial. The next stage of grief is anger. And that is one that I really can remember on my mushroom trip. I have a very vivid memory of essentially interrogating my mirror as if I was at fault and basically just being extremely upset at the fact that my grandpa had passed away. I had not expressed any feelings like this when I was sober, ever. I had basically just kind of not thought about it, but on mushrooms it was all I could think about. It completely controlled my entire experience. I was very upset to like fighting words, like I really wanted to fight I guess the Grim Reaper himself. I was about to square up with Old Death. Just me and him. The next stage of grief is bargaining, and actually I think this related somewhat to my experience of denial while on the mushroom trip, where I was just in complete awe that this had happened. The bargaining really occurred as well. I started essentially begging the universe to not do this again too soon. Like, I became immediately aware of just how vulnerable all my friends and family were, and I just began seriously, literally, I mean, I guess they make these for a good reason, bargaining with whatever entity is controlling the events that are happening in this reality, or multiple entities, perhaps, if you're inclined. But I did, in fact, and this, interestingly enough, all was mediated by the mirror. I'm not sure why I tend to focus on a mirror on my high-dose mushroom trips, but I use it as like a... I'm not sure actually why I use it. The next stage of grief is depression, and it's something that I absolutely went through during this experience. It was a wave of depression thicker than anything I have felt before. I'm not especially prone to depression or depressive moods, I don't believe, at least not to the degree that many people are, but I can probably say that I was experiencing a heavy simulated version of what it's probably like for major depressives. I was laying on my bed just crushed by the overwhelming fact of reality. That's the worst, is when you're just crushed by the facts, and the fact was that everything was going to meet annihilation, myself, my family, and all my loved ones, and that it's going to hurt every single time. Pardon the bug. Not quite sure if I got it or not. But back to what I was saying. So following my massive depressive episode where I was under my covers, essentially just in tears at the grim reality of it all, I experienced what I think is the single most beneficial aspect of mushrooms when it occurs to you, and that was a resurgence of pride. It was the most powerful sensation I've ever felt, but it was a grim and solemn acceptance that I was not going to be dissuaded by these grim realities. It was again heavily mediated by my mirror and absolutely would have looked silly to anybody that was perceiving it, but I was feeling strong. I was feeling at my core as though I could handle the burden of being. And to be able to take that depressive episode and turn it into a burning in your chest, a resolve and a determination to face life head on despite this was one of the most motivational things I think I could ever experience in my entire life. And I wish it on anybody who decides to do these things ever. And this ties into the last stage, which is acceptance. And so I can't say that the theme of the end of the trip was acceptance of this. It was more so, like I said, a solemn resolve that I know this is the way things are, but I'm not going to do what I did during my depressive episode. The depressive scene brought me down so hard that I basically, during the pride stage, which hit next, just looked at myself like a little weakling. Like, it was so interesting to go on these highs and lows, to go from essentially sobbing in my bed to getting up and looking at myself like, really, this is how you're gonna honor the death of your strong grandfather? You're gonna cower and lay down? Is that what he would have wanted? And I don't speak like this when I'm sober. Like, these aren't weird attitudes I hold currently, but I'm trying to explain to you that I went through these immense highs and lows during the mushroom trip. I went through sobbing in the bed to beating your chest and looking in the mirror and essentially telling myself to get a grip and be a man. And then before that, I was bargaining. I was trying to barter with the Grim Reaper, and then I was crying at the fact that the Grim Reaper existed. And then I was looking at the Grim Reaper like, you know what? I can't wait for you to meet me, because I'm gonna go down hard, baby. I'm gonna go down hard. And I think that probably explains why mushrooms are so provenly effective for people in end of life therapy, because it does give you a sense that, okay, death, you can take me, but maybe I'll take a bite out of you too. Now, I don't know what that means, but it basically says that you're going to be a human and you're going to live forthright and not accept what is actually the fact that most of the things you do are going to be erased by time. And so I haven't lost that feeling of a pride in pushing the rock up the hill, as our dear friend Sisyphus has. And when you apply that to the death of a male model in your life, you get this type of, it really felt like a spiritual passing the torch of, to whatever degree he could instill a lesson in me or instill strength. It felt more fortified than it ever did before. So when I reflect on that experience that I had, I can't help but honestly feel that I was brought tremendous closure by rapidly undergoing 5 traumatic stages of grief in essentially a 5-hour interval. This was a rough experience psychologically. I was tired afterwards. I really felt just overall drained. I spent most of it alone, and I really craved social connection afterwards, kind of as a way to just break the burden that I just went through. I just went through a very heavy experience, and the best thing to do after that is just go talk to somebody and talk to them about the war you just went through and just relax. And so that's what I did. And to this day, I truly feel like I was brought closure by this experience. I don't feel residual negative feelings about the death of my grandfather. Obviously, I don't feel good about it at all. And maybe somebody who's experienced grief on a longer term may tell me that negative feelings may reoccur. But I gotta be honest, I don't see that happening. I really feel that I went through everything I needed to go through in the spurt that I did. And before that, I basically hadn't even allowed it to come to the surface. So if you're in a situation where you are grieving a loved one and you feel as though those emotions have not come to the surface, don't take this as a recommendation that you do that, but know that there's a direct way to bring every single thing you're feeling subliminally about the death of a relative to the surface. and magic mushrooms is the medium you can do that through. And so ultimately, I would recommend it to all my close friends and people that I know could handle this responsibly. But if you feel that you are slanted in a different direction psychologically and that you might just really not experience, like I did, the pride phase, and you may just lock down in pure depression for 5 hours, I can't tell you that that's not a possibility. But what I can tell you is that I was able to cycle through all 5 stages of grief. Sorry, today's video is a bit of a bummer, but I hope you learned something interesting about what it's like to take a heroic dose of mushrooms and grieve the death of your grandfather. If you're seeing this for the first time, consider subscribing. That will help me a lot, or hit the like button, and I'll see you tomorrow.